So this happened when I was 20 years old. I'm 22 now, so it's not that long ago. While in college, I was a babysitter during the week for a family, and sometimes I would nanny for this other, wealthier family on the weekends. They would go away often on the weekends and leave their 2 kids, so I would stay at the house for the weekend with the kids. They had a whole dedicated guest bedroom just for me, and the family was super nice, so it was honestly great while it lasted. It happened in the fall. The leaves were all falling and it was chilly outside. I had gotten to the house Friday, and Friday night went completely fine. I just played with the 2 kids, who I'll nickname James and Jessica. James was 7, Jessica was 5. They were both cute and well behaved. Their bedtimes were 7:30 for Jessica and 8:30 for James. During the day, I'd play with each of them with their toys. The family had 2 dedicated rooms for their toys, one for Jess, one for James. Jessica loved her dolls and doll houses. I spent a lot of time playing with her. James loved playing his video games, so I'd watch him play. These kids really had everything, and the house was gorgeous. It was a giant property with a big pond in the middle. It had a separate 3-car garage, and then a pool with a pool house across the pond, which was also a bar and rec room, with a pool table and darts, arcade games, and a giant TV and multiple sofas. This family was so well off and over the top that they even had an intercom that connected from the pool house to the actual house, so that if you press a button on the wall in either place, it would ring and then you could talk through it. The pool house also had a giant window that overlooked the pond and had a view of the house. So after the kids went to bed, I was free to do as I pleased for the night. It was great. I wasn't supposed to have friends over though. That was a rule I respected. I would just FaceTime my friends and watch movies in the pool house to pass the time. It was not a bad place to have free time in, I'll tell you that. I started getting hungry, so I walked back across the property to the house, entered the code to let myself in, and went to the kitchen. They had so many snacks and food that I was allowed to help myself to. I grabbed a frozen snack from the freezer and threw it in the microwave. And when I was done, I went back across the property to the pool house. I liked hanging out in there more because I could be louder on the phone and have the TV as loud as I want without waking the kids. I was on the couch eating, watching the movie White Chicks, while texting a bunch of my friends. I was just in the middle of telling my friends how great of a gig this was, when the intercom beeper gave me a heart attack. I went to go press the answer button, and I heard Jessica's voice on the other end, saying she's scared because she keeps hearing noises. Usually she'd sleep through the night, so I'd have to go tuck her back in. I set my food down and ran back across the yard to the house. I entered through the door with the code lock again and went to Jess's room. She must have ran straight back to her bed after we got off the intercom, because she was already back in her bed all scared. I went to tickle her and tuck her in just so she wouldn't be scared anymore. When she felt better, I left her room, shut the door, and walked down the hall back to the kitchen to grab some wine. As I was looking for a wine opener, I heard the ever so lightest crack in the wood floor from another room. I froze and looked in that direction, instinctively waiting for a second sound. I didn't want to start freaking myself out now. I didn't want Jessica saying she's hearing noises to get in my head. I was thinking it was a regular house settling noise. I admit I was a little creeped out now, but I left the lights and TV on in the pool house, so I had to go back. I went outside, locked the door with the code, and ran across to the pool house. I sat back down on the couch and resumed eating the rest of my food. I didn't end up bringing the wine. I still had White Chicks on, though I was mostly just getting distracted on my phone. Then that damn intercom went off again, making me jump in my seat. I hurried to answer it, and when I did, there was silence on the other end. "Jessica," I said into the mic. I thought for sure I heard someone breathing, but that's all I could hear. I said both Jessica and James' names at least 3 times each. Now I was actually starting to become terrified. I called my friend Kelsey and told her I want her to come here because I'm actually getting really scared. I told her that the little girl I'm watching said that she was hearing noises, and then I heard a noise, and now someone pressed the intercom button but didn't say anything. I felt like it was not something one of the kids would do. I was still on the phone with Kelsey, who was telling me to stop being paranoid, but she also sounded drunk. I was looking out the window to the house the whole time I was on the phone with her. The hallway lights turned on. I told Kelsey this, and any ounce of possibility that it was one of the kids disappeared. when a large figure stepped into frame at one of the hallway windows. I screamed and dropped the phone as I was looking at a grown man who seemed to see me, and he was looking back at me. I realized the intercom was still on this entire time. I picked up my phone, hung up on Kelsey, and called 911. And as I did, I was crying, screaming into the intercom that I'm calling 911 right now, leave us alone. I was basically screaming everything I said to the police into the intercom. I went back to the window, and he wasn't at the window in the house anymore. I was hysterical, crying, begging the 911 operator to please hurry up. She kept telling me to calm down, asking me a million questions. I kept yelling the address into the phone and saying please hurry. When she asked are the kids safe, I screamed no, they're in the house still with that man. And that's when I heard the scream of Jessica through the intercom, and I completely broke down and fell to my knees crying as the 911 operator was still trying to get me to keep it together, but I couldn't. I said I don't know what to do, and she said the police are almost there, you need to wait. I replied he has the kids, and she asked if I saw if the man had any weapons. I said I couldn't tell, but then I heard Jessica's voice speaking into the intercom, saying my name. I went over and shouted, yes, I'm here. Get your brother and get out of the house. She was crying, saying that there was a man in here. I said, yes, I know. Just get your brother and come outside now. It was the bravest thing I had ever done, running outside back across the yard to the house and meeting the two kids who were already at the door. I grabbed both of them and led them back across the yard to the pool house again, where we hid with the lights off. Both of them were crying, and I still wanted to as well, but I had to be strong and keep it together for them. I still was on the phone with 911, and she eventually told me that the police are here, and that they'll come meet us at the pool house. Those words were the most comforting words I'd heard in my life. The flashlights of the police shone through the windows. I led the kids to the door, where we met a couple police officers. The female cop took the kids with her to one car. I went with another cop to another car. There were already 3 cop cars in the front of the house, and more kept showing up. I was answering all the questions I was asked, and then they found him. They brought out a guy who looked to be right around 6 foot. He looked at everyone as he was brought out in handcuffs and put in the back of a car. I still remember his face as he looked at me. He looked like the product of incest. His face was messed up. Jessica and James' parents were called right away and made aware of the situation. There was no way any of us were staying there that night. The parents arranged for the kids' aunt to come pick them up to stay with her, and I guess she called out of work the next day. I went home after they didn't need me anymore, but when I got home that night, I didn't sleep. I was still in shock, I think. I still had a leftover adrenaline rush. The parents understandably didn't leave their kids alone for a long time after that, I'm sure. I do know they pressed charges to the fullest extent, and with their resources, I hope that creep got what he deserved and more. I respectfully told them I couldn't stay there anymore because I was haunted by that night. I could only imagine how scarred those poor kids were, and maybe still are. I was 28 years old, solo camping in a local woodland with my beagle Reggie, only realizing I wasn't as solo as I thought. It was November. The weather was still mildly warm during the day, but at night it would get cold, so I came prepared. I brought my portable fire pit, lighter fluid, a lighter, and an axe for chopping wood. I also, of course, brought a tent, a sleeping bag, and my fishing gear so that I could fish at the lake. I brought enough food to last the 2 days we'd be there, but if I caught some fish, I would plan to eat it. I hiked from my truck about a mile into the forest until I was near enough to the lake. I set up my campsite in a comfortable little opening, and I brought Reggie along with me to the lake to go fishing. I caught a couple smaller fish that weren't really worth trying to cook, so I threw them back in. Reggie kept looking into the forest at something, and his tail would stop wagging as if he locked onto something. It could have been any number of little animals that he heard or saw. He's well trained not to go running off though, so I don't keep him on a leash. After maybe an hour of fishing, we went for a hike around the lake. When we were directly across the lake from our campsite, I looked over to the other side, and I saw what looked like a couple of people walking into the woods. They were so far away it was hard to tell, but they really did look like people, and they were right around where the campsite was. I didn't want to get robbed, So I told Reggie come on, and we made a quick pace back around the lake. When we got back to the campsite, my tent zipper was open. Someone had gone through it, no doubt. Surprisingly, nothing appeared to be missing though. Not that there was really much to steal beyond the fire pit and fishing supplies. Still, I knew I was right when I thought I saw people, and the fact that they had gone through my campsite gave me the creeps. To be safe, I spent the next hour or so moving my campsite to a different spot a little further up the lake. Then I started chopping some wood to get a fire going in the fire pit. Once that was going, I fed Reggie, and then heated up some chili for dinner. Then we sat by the fire, and I was writing in my journal when Reggie started barking at something in the forest. It was dark now, and I didn't really see anything beyond what the fire lit up. I looked out into the darkness, a little creeped out. On that note, I brought Reggie inside of the tent and went to put out the fire. If there were people out in these woods, I didn't really want to be advertising my location with the fire. I climbed into the sleeping bag, and with my reading light next to me, I was reading my novel. Reggie's ears would repeatedly move as he was hearing things that I wasn't hearing. He kept looking around at the tent walls. I kept saying, "What is it, boy?" He started to growl. He heard something out there. It could have maybe been a deer, it could have maybe been a bear, or it could have been a person. I found the idea of a person being out there still, in the dark, to be more terrifying than a bear. Eventually, Reggie calmed down and put his head down. With that, I was uncomfortable and wanted the night to pass, so I turned off my lantern and went to sleep. I woke up hours later to Reggie growling and howling. I told him to be quiet. I listened, and I could hear someone whistling, the kind of whistling you do to a dog to get their attention. Reggie started growling again in response to it. Someone was actually out there at my campsite in the pitch black darkness, and I was scared shitless. The whistling turned to a clicking noise from someone's mouth. Then footsteps started getting closer to the tent until they were right outside the tent, and then they stopped. Reggie was going ballistic howling, and I grabbed him and got him to be quiet without saying anything. Without the crackling of the fire, there was total silence apart from the wind. Reggie started growling again, looking in the direction of the zipper of the tent. Silence, until finally, another whistle from right outside the tent door. Reggie went ballistic again. I tried to fake a really deep, commanding voice and yelled, "You better get out of here, I have a gun." But my voice just came out shaky and scared sounding. The footsteps walked away from the tent at a slow, heavy pace until they faded away completely. That, or they simply stopped in their tracks not far from the tent, because Reggie kept growling on and off for like an hour after that. I couldn't sleep after that, but I was too terrified to leave the tent and pack up everything in the dark. My phone had no service in the middle of the forest, so it's not like I could even call a family member or a friend to tell them about what's going on. And then, out in the distance, there was a woman's scream that probably echoed for miles. It sounded like a woman literally screaming for her life. This was the final straw. I grabbed Reggie, put on my boots, grabbed my flashlight, and ran. I ran the way I came all the way until I got to my truck. I still had no cell reception. I slept in my truck that night, and at dawn I went back into the woods with Reggie back to the campsite. I collected all my things and disassembled my tent. I didn't even pay attention to if my things were gone through again. I was just in a rush to get out of there. Half an hour later, I had the truck loaded up and I was out of there. As soon as I had reception, I called this non-emergency police number that I found online to report a woman's scream and suspicious people around my campsite the night before. I don't know what became of any of that, and I don't know what was going on in those woods, but I never returned to go camping there again. I was home alone one night. Our house is a split-level house, and the upstairs is an apartment basically, so my brother and I live upstairs while our parents live downstairs. It's pretty nice. It was a weekend and I was staying in. It was rainy outside, so my friends didn't really want to do anything. I spent the night watching scary movies in my room. I was watching Dr. Sleep, a movie I'd never seen before, and I was pretty invested in it. I paused it while I went to go grab a snack in the kitchen. I went to the pantry closet, grabbed a box of crackers, and then heard a sound from downstairs, which I dismissed as nothing. I went back to my room, shut the door, and turned the movie back on. I noticed the backyard motion light was now on, and then I heard some sounds from downstairs, directly below my bedroom. It sounded like the back door being closed. So to explain the layout of our house, my room is directly above the back door to the house on my parents' floor. The walls in this house are paper thin. You could hear a pin drop from downstairs. So I easily heard someone downstairs. And when I paused the movie, it became more obvious that I was hearing footsteps. I texted my family group chat asking who just got home. My mom answered within a minute saying we're not home. That would mean it would have to be my brother, but that would be incredibly weird since he never enters through the back of the house. He also wasn't supposed to be home tonight. I said in our group chat, "I hear someone downstairs. Alex, is that you?" He didn't reply. I heard the footsteps crossing the house towards the fronts until they were out of earshot. Then I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. I turned off the TV. The footsteps were coming straight down the hall to my room, skipping every other room in the hallway. They were heavy footsteps. They got to my door, and then my door opened. I was laying still in my bed, pretending to have my eyes shut, squinting just enough to see a head peering into the room through the doorway, looking right at me. It was dark. I could only see the person's eyes, and it didn't look like Alex. He stood at the doorway, watching for what felt like forever as I laid there pretending to be asleep. After maybe 30 seconds to a minute, he closed the door, but I didn't hear footsteps walk away. I texted my family group chat in all capitals, "Alex, please tell me that's you in the house." He replied back almost instantly, saying, "No, what are you talking about?" That was when I told them someone is in the house. I called 911 and started whispering into the phone, and that was when I finally heard footsteps walk away from the door. He must have heard me start to speak, even in a whisper. The footsteps went down the stairs, and then I couldn't hear them anymore. I was told to stay on the line with the dispatcher until help arrived. There was a knock at the door downstairs about 5 minutes later, so when the dispatcher told me I was good to go down to let the police in, I did. In my county, police work in pairs, so the 2 police officers who arrived looked through the whole house with me, checking every closet, under every bed, and when it was determined that the house was clear, they left. One of my parents left the back door unlocked. It was as simple as that. There's no chance of sleeping after something like this happens. Nobody would be home until the next day, so I had to get through this night alone. A little while after the police left, the backyard motion light turned on. Something set it off. I looked out my window and caught just a glimpse of a man walking away from the house into a far dark corner of the backyard where I couldn't see him anymore. I think he may have tried entering the house again, but this time the door was locked. I watched through the window for as long as the motion light was on. When it turned off, it was too dark to see anything out there. As long as the light didn't go off again, then I'd know he wasn't coming back. Thankfully, he never did. Taking half a second to lock your doors can be the difference between someone getting in your house or not. Because my parents forgot to lock the door, I will now forever have the haunting image of seeing that person's head peering into my room looking at me, specifically the eyes. It's an image that's going to stay with me. When I was around 12, I had the one bedroom in the house that wasn't on the second floor. My parents' house was a high ranch, so when you entered the house, it split off to 2 floors. One half flight of stairs going upstairs and one downstairs. The downstairs level had the den, the garage, my bedroom, and a bathroom. The other 3 bedrooms in the house were all upstairs. Since I grew up the oldest and the only boy in the house with 2 sisters, I got the room downstairs because it was the biggest and technically the coolest room. After I turned 10, my parents gave my twin bed to my little sister and I got a full-size bed, which was a bit of an upgrade because the room was big and could certainly fit a bigger bed. When I was 12, my little sisters were around 5 and 8, so at this age I would be allowed home alone, but my 5-year-old sister wouldn't be left alone with me, and my 8-year-old sister would only be left alone with me if my parents weren't going to be gone for too long. If they'd be gone for longer periods of the day, then one of my parents would take both of my sisters. For this short period of time, I'd say like 3 nights in a row, maybe a little more, I was waking up in the middle of the night for no reason, and I'd have trouble falling back asleep. Considering I was 12 years old, I knew I shouldn't have been having sleeping problems at that age. I was sleeping with the fan on next to my bed because it was a hot couple of days in the middle of the summer, so I wasn't sure what exactly was waking me up considering the fan provided a steady white noise. One of these nights, I got up after waking up to refill my glass of water. I went to the bathroom right outside my bedroom, and as I was filling it up, I thought I heard something come from inside my room. I turned off the faucet and then listened, but now there was nothing, just the sound of the fan. I walked to the doorway in my bedroom, and I couldn't tell what it was, but something was creeping me out about my room now. I went upstairs to the living room and decided to sleep on the couch that night. I fell asleep eventually, but that same night, again, I woke up, this time to noises from the kitchen. I saw the glow of the light from the fridge and the sounds of someone rummaging through it. The way that floor was set up had the kitchen out of view from the couch in the living room. I couldn't see who was there. I heard the fridge door eventually shut, then footsteps walk away and downstairs. I was drowsy, and so I went back to sleep. I believe it was the next day that my mom was folding clothes in my room and she told me my room stunk and I needed to clean up whatever that smell was. I ignored her because I really didn't smell anything. I wish I didn't ignore her though. That night, our dad put the air conditioning on because it was simply too hot. After we all watched a movie as a family, everyone started getting ready for bed. I went to my room and played video games for a little while before getting sleepy. By that time, I turned off the TV and console and rolled on my side to go to sleep like I always did. Tonight I didn't have the fan on because the air conditioning was on, so there was just the sound of the air blowing out from the vents in the ceiling. I fell asleep, but once again I woke up not long after. I didn't know what the sound I heard was. All I heard was the vent fan blowing air. Then when it stopped blowing air, the room was silent, and I heard something. Breathing. But it wasn't my breathing though. I looked around the room. The closet door was shut, so there was no way it was coming from there. Part of my childlike innocence assumed it was my younger sister playing a prank. I got on the floor and looked the one place I could think to look. Under the bed. I lifted the little piece of cloth that dangles at the bottom of the bed, and there was a very large person laying underneath my bed on a pile of blankets. Their head was facing me, but their eyes were closed. I fell backwards and basically crab walked out of the room screaming "Dad." I heard my parents' door swing open and my parents yelling in concern. I pointed into my room and said "under the bed," and my dad went and pulled out this very large, dirty-looking man. I remember my dad quite easily physically forcing the man outside as my mom called 911. I'm sure he went to jail for a while. Or maybe not because he was homeless, who knows. This did a lot of mental damage to me where I didn't even want to sleep in my own room anymore, or let alone in that house. I had to sleep in the middle of my parents for a while. Then my dad installed security cameras all over the house. We threw out everything that was opened in the fridge because we had no idea what he put his mouth on in there. The fear of someone being under my bed stayed with me for a long time, years to come. We don't even know how long he was hiding under my bed. It could have been a few days. The smell, the person going through the fridge, the randomly waking up every night for a few days. Whether he meant harm or not, having someone hiding under your bed is every child's biggest nightmare. This story is from my great-grandfather, who is currently at the ripe old age of 101. He's told this story at family gatherings for years. He's from the city of Yaroslavl in Russia. I guess it was the Soviet Union when he was born there. Being from the USSR, of course he served under the Soviet Union during World War II, then fleeing to the United States a few years after to escape communism. He told me this story again recently. It happened not long after the Battle of Veliki Luki, which wasn't a major battle of the war, but it still ended up in a large amount of Soviet and German bloodshed, as most battles at the time did. It was the evening, and according to my great-grandfather, it was very cold that night, like hellish cold. They were in a small house/building that was one of the few with no damage to it, which made it nice because it was warm. Him and his comrades were celebrating with drinks, songs, laughing, and joking, what you could imagine a celebration would look like. At some point in the evening, two fellow soldiers walked into the building. My great-grandfather and his friend Sergei didn't care for these two. It was apparently because they were loudmouths and were just unpleasant guys. Sergei asked my great-grandfather if he wanted to go out and have a smoke. He agreed, and the two put on their heavy coats and walked out into the freezing cold air. My great-grandfather pulled out a cigarette, as did Sergei, and then he lit both of their cigarettes. They were talking for a while, both enjoying their cigarette and basking in the glory that came along with winning the battle that had been going on for about 2 months. After my great-grandfather finished his cigarette, they were both about to go back inside when they heard what sounded like a man scream from the woods in the distance. Fearing that it was the scream from one of their comrades, possibly being attacked by a patrol of pissed-off Germans, they went back inside quickly and grabbed their guns. Because of the fact that there might be armed Germans, they got a bunch more of their fellow soldiers to run into the woods with them. My great-grandpa mentioned that as he got deeper into the woods, he started to get a weird feeling, like dread and fear. When they couldn't hear screaming anymore, my great-grandpa suggested that they all split into duos and search for whoever it was. Sergei went with him, while the others went off in their own duos. After about 2 minutes of walking through the dark, cold woodlands, my great-grandpa said that he could hear faint crying, like someone was in pain. Sergei heard this too, so they walked to where they heard the crying sounds. They started seeing drops of blood in the snow, so they both began to take the situation as more of a threat than they were earlier. It still gives me chills when my great-grandpa tells me this part. When him and Sergei got to the source of the crying sound, they had found the most bizarre and disturbing scene they had witnessed. 2 German soldiers on the ground, one of them dead, one alive. One of them had their uniforms ripped and bloodied. The alive one was cowering by a tree, muttering stuff in German. He didn't notice my great-grandpa and Sergei right away. My great-grandpa then walked towards the other body. The corpse was horrifically mutilated, missing limbs, skin ripped off the face. His uniform was shredded and it looked like he had been scalped. Another thing that stood out to my great-grandpa was the smell. He couldn't describe the smell, saying it wasn't like a dead body, but more like chemicals. The corpse looked fresh. Sergei investigated the living soldier, who then, noticing Sergei, jumped back in terror, as if he had been traumatized. He was shouting stuff in German. It was only then that my great-grandpa noticed that his leg had been torn apart and his chest was bloody. He said he could remember that German screaming something like "Das Kolas" or something similar. Sergei pulled out his pistol and put the German out of his misery with a single shot to the head. Almost immediately after this, my great-grandpa described hearing moaning-like noises, and that's when a very tall thing started running in the darkness away from them. Afraid, Sergei and great-grandpa started shooting erratically in the direction of the thing. The other men ran over, but the thing was gone. All of the men were reprimanded when they got back to the village, but a report was sent to the high command. It was never investigated further. My great-grandpa claims that it was the most terrifying experience of his life. It makes him stressed when thinking back on the sight of that mangled German and that thing. This happened when my fiancée Morgan and I just moved into our house together in a quiet little town. We still live in this house. It's a modest, cute little house perfect for us and a couple of kids if and when we decide to have. We met one of the neighbors right off the bat. They seemed nice. They were an older couple in their late 60s. The neighbors on the other side were pretty far away, so we didn't meet them for a while. We were still in the unpacking and furnishing phase. It might have been week 2 of living in the house. We were exhausted by every night, having to work our jobs and then also setting up the house and unloading. Morgan was cooking pasta in the kitchen. I was sitting at the table talking to her while on my laptop shopping for area rugs. It was a little stuffy in the house, so I was going to go slide open the back door, but as I got to it, I looked into the backyard and noticed someone sitting in one of the chairs. He was kind of hunched over with his head down. When I say I almost shit myself when I saw it, I'm not kidding. I whispered Morgan's name and said, "Don't scream, but there's a man in the yard." She walked over to look outside and gasped. She grabbed me and kind of hid behind me and said, "Go say something." "No, wait, don't." Truth be told, I myself didn't know if I should go out there or not. I'm not the biggest man, to be honest, and even though this guy had his back to us and was sitting down, he looked like he was bigger than me. Morgan suggested I knock on the glass and yell at him to leave. I didn't want to do it though, I was scared. The backyard is huge, but right outside the backyard door is a patio with the leftover furniture. The lights in the yard weren't on. We just saw him through the interior lights shining through the glass door, which meant he had to know we were in here. I said fuck it, knocked on the glass and yelled, "Hey, you need to get off our property." The man turned around and looked at me. He then got up with this half smile, almost like he was laughing. He looked 50. He had a really long gray beard and tattoos down to his wrists. He walked up to the glass. I made sure the door was locked. He stood on the other side of the glass door and shifted his gaze to Morgan. He started licking his lips and saying vile shit. I yelled, "All right, I'm calling the police." I closed the sliding blind to get him out of our faces. I called 911 and told the operator to please hurry and send police to our house. I could still hear the man on the other side of the door, now speaking at a very high volume, almost yelling, still saying disgusting things about Morgan. I put the phone to the glass so the operator could hear it. He made me stay on the phone until police would show up. Eventually it went quiet outside, and so I took a peek out the glass and the guy was gone. Still, I couldn't wait for police to arrive, and when they did, they searched the backyard, took a police report, and left. We thought it was over, but later on that night when we were in the living room watching TV, we both agreed we heard something from outside in the yard. I went over to the window and kinked the blind, just enough to see that man outside again. He had a cigarette in his hand. He was talking to himself, or trying to talk to us, facing the house. He noticed the kink in the blinds because he ran over to the window. I jumped back, and he started pounding on the window, saying all these awful, sick things he wanted to do to Morgan. I told her to go upstairs. I didn't want her to hear this anymore. I yelled, "I'm gonna call the police again," and then the pounding stopped and he went silent. I waited a few seconds before kinking the blind again, and he was gone. I went upstairs to go comfort Morgan, who was visibly shaken. I told her he was gone, when in hindsight I should have called the cops again. Downstairs, I heard bumping and knocking. I went halfway down the stairs and heard bumps on the back door and the doorknob twisting and turning. He was trying to get into the house. I grabbed the phone in the kitchen and called 911 again, once again begging the operator to send police now. This time the police arrived a lot quicker, and I didn't alert the man outside that they were coming. But unfortunately, by the time they showed up, that man disappeared again. It's very likely he just ran off into the trees deep in the backyard. He didn't come back again that night. The next day, we went around knocking on neighbors' doors, both introducing ourselves to those we hadn't met yet and asking them if they knew anyone matching the description of that man. What we found out was disturbing. A couple a few doors down from us knew that man. He was known for beating his ex-wife and having a drinking and drug problem, and generally just regarded as very dangerous. He lived around the block from us in a small, rundown house. That's the scariest part. We reported him to the police, but since we didn't have him on video, we couldn't press charges. We don't know if he still lives there because we haven't heard from or seen him in a long time. I hope it stays that way.